Welcome to True Crime Chronicles. Some people claim that he lived and ate with the devil, but I insist that he was the devil himself. But I'm not here to bore you by narrating all of the victims he killed and how he killed them, because there's a more horrifying side to this story. Julio Santana was a contract killer, and he was a very good one at that. He never, and I mean never, missed his target. He was a walking and breathing death machine. But there's a more horrifying side to this story. Julio never wanted to be a murderer. He dreamed of being a normal man with a normal life and a normal family. However, one moment changed young Julio into a monster. It was a moment that made him think that killing people was a good thing. Julio's transformation began with this. It was August 6th, 1971. And Julio Santana was kneeling with one leg on the ground and one hand put on the trigger of his weapon. And Julio, who was only 17 at the time, was just minutes away from committing his first murder. He was terrified of death, just like any normal person would be, and he kept asking himself if this man deserved to die. Even though it was obvious that he did, Julio couldn't help but wonder why he was the one to carry out the deed. About a week earlier, the man Julio was about to kill, Antonio Martins, was a 38-year-old fisherman, had just raped a 13-year-old girl in a nearby village. Antonio had told the young girl that he wanted to take her on a trip to see the pink dolphins on the Tocantins River in Brazil. However, as soon as she got into his canoe for the journey, Antonio raped her brutally. Even if it makes me upset to think about it, my fury is nothing compared to the wrath that the girl's father felt when he watched his daughter coming home with blood flowing down her thighs. My anger cannot compare to that. He was fuming, with foam coming out of his mouth, and wanted nothing more than to bury the paedophile and rapist Antonio 6 feet underground. Unfortunately, he couldn't do the job and needed an expert assassin who would get the job done without missing. Guess who he hired? Not Julio Santana. The girl's father actually hired Julio's uncle instead. Remember how I said at the beginning that Julio wasn't always a killer? But in reality, he was only a young boy who lived in a remote community deep within the Amazon jungle. At the time, the hope of virtually every child in that village was that they would grow up to be an accomplished fisherman. Julio was that poor little kid who no one cared about after he found out that his uncle Cicero, who was a military policeman, was also an assassin. What a man, right? Enforce that law by day and then just break it at night, while we're still trying to wrap our heads around Cicero's line of work. This was the moment Julio got initiated into the cult of assassination. When the father of the little girl contracted Cicero to get the job done, Cicero in turn gave the job to Julio. Being around a man like Cicero meant getting involved in frequent shooting practice almost all of the time. Therefore, Cicero knew that Julio could get that job done for him. However, why did Cicero give the job to Julio? Cicero could have easily gotten that job done himself without even flinching. But old Cicero tricked Julio into doing it instead of doing it himself. He handed Julio his rifle, gave him his blessings, and told him to go kill that paedophile and break a leg while doing it. Well, maybe not that last part, but you get what I mean, right? Anyway, here we are back to where we started, with Julio kneeling on one knee and the rifle in his hand. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel. From what his uncle had said, the man deserved to die. Nonetheless, Julio lacked the courage to actually kill him. He waited patiently under the stuffy and steamy forest canopy for 3 hours, staring at his victim on a wooden boat. The boat was barely 40 yards away, and he was certain he wouldn't miss. It's not forever, Julio, he assured himself, so he fired. Here's where Sean's actions became counterproductive for Julio. First, he was haunted by the image of the man's lifeless body inside the wooden boat. Second, a devout Catholic, Julio knew he'd committed a grave sin against God. How could he right this wrong? What was he thinking? The only thing he had ever killed was monkeys in the bush for food or forest rodents. Where did he go wrong with this? You can't really argue that the man deserved what he received, so Julio flung the dead body into the river and vowed to himself that he would never again kill another man, even though he did that 499 more times in that exact instant. He raced straight to his uncle and vented his frustration on him, but his uncle was able to persuade him that he was performing the Lord's job and that God would forgive him. And that got to be the worst uncle ever, believe me. But Julio believed him, perhaps because he was still quite naive, or perhaps he just needed reassurance that he hadn't just committed the worst crime ever. But it was clear that Julio's first killing started a chain reaction that continued until his name became synonymous with death. In the Amazon, a group of communist insurgents known as the Araguaia guerrillas began fighting the Brazilian government. The so-called guerrillas recruited farmers and fishermen to fight for them, but Julio's uncle sent them to the opposing side of the conflict to fight for the Brazilian government. For the first time in a while, Julio knew he was acting morally. He gave his government tasks his all and joined a small squad of soldiers that captured the insurgent. I find this story amusing since Julio received a bottle of Coca-Cola, which he considered to be a luxury at the time, as compensation for his successful capture. Julio recorded the names of each victim he killed in a notebook to keep track of the total, which rose to 492 by the time. A 22-year-old schoolteacher named Maria Lucia Petit was included in the notebook. Maria was a silent member of the guerrillas, but you can guarantee Julio was able to unearth her secret membership and took her life in the process. Another man who was mentioned in Julio's book was one he did in 1987. On the mere suspicion that she had cheated on her spouse, he was told to kill the woman. Even after Julio's insane killings, he stopped killing people in 2006 when he was 52. In addition to the fact that he was obviously aging, Julio discovered that his uncle was defrauding him of the money he received for all the murders he committed. Can you believe he only received about $70 per kill? I'm not very good at math, but if you multiply that amount by the total number of victims, you'll probably find that he earned only pennies for his years of service, while his uncle was probably a millionaire. He also had to quit because his wife gave him the option of killing people or his family, and he picked his family. He never shared his story with anybody else, but the persistent reporter, and now leads a secluded life in Brazil. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel. See you next time.